back to another episode. I believe this is going to be knitting podcast number 6, and it's been about a week since my last project update, but it's a beautiful fall day here in New Hampshire, and I just really felt like chatting with you guys about what I've been up to, so we're going to do another catch-up. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Lizzie. I'm a PhD student in the sciences, and I knit in my free time. This is my channel where I'd like to talk about all things knitting, and it's mainly a knitting podcast where I give project updates and bring you along with me in my knitting journey. I am also a vegan knitter, and so that means that instead of wool, I primarily use synthetic fibers, and then in the summer I do use a bit of plant fibers. So right now I'm knitting with a lot of acrylic. Today we have a project update for 2 WIPs that I talked about last time, so that I will be covering my Esther Jacket and the Hollingbourne sock, and then I actually have a new cast on, which is another sock, because it's going to be Sockpalooza over here. So if any of that interests you, I invite you to hang out with us as we chat about some knitting. First on the agenda today for my WIPs is my Esther Jacket by Petite Knit. Alrighty, here she is. So this is a cardigan by Petite Knit that has this diamond texture all throughout it, and it is a drop shoulder construction. And it is called the Esther Jacket because it is a bit more thicker. The fabric that you create is a bit more thicker. The gauge is around 16 stitches in the pattern, and you use an Aran weight yarn or multiple strands held together in order to create your garment. So it's a pretty thick cardigan, and I think that's kind of what distinguishes it from a cardigan to become a jacket. And last time I had joined under the arm, so I had joined the back and the 2 fronts, because you start out by knitting the back panel and then you pick up stitches along the shoulders, and then you knit the 2 fronts, and then you join under the underarm. And so I had knit maybe just like a few inches into the body here, but I have now completed the body and the ribbing, and I also knit the first button placket, and I am halfway through the placket on the other side. I am knitting this out of Stylecraft Special in the color Parchment. So there's the yarn. So before I get into the details about the yarn situation, I'm gonna throw this on and talk about the length of the body, because there was a bit of some back and forth from me this week about how long to knit this. So I'm gonna throw this on. So as you can see, the circumference wise, I think is pretty good. So I chose the right size. I'm knitting this in the size extra, extra small, but my gauge is around 14 stitches per 10 centimeters instead of 16. So I'm coming out with a bigger garment, which is what I intended, because my bust circumference does not fit in extra, extra small. It fits in extra small. And so I'm intentionally making a smaller size because of my larger gauge. So I think that ended up working out. And when I got to the point where I was gonna close in on the end of the textured pattern and have to start working on the hem, I was trying to decide how far to knit it, because I measured the amount that I was supposed to knit in centimeters for the, I believe it was the extra, extra small size, and then I tried it on and it just seemed too short, and I really didn't want to make this cropped. I have a lot of cropped the cardigans that I have knit have ended up being cropped and a little bit too cropped, so I really didn't want to do this, and because this is supposed to be really an outerwear, because it's a jacket, I did not want it too cropped. So I was trying my best not to do that, and so I was looking at other Ravelry projects, and I was at 6 repeats of the diamonds, and I was counting what other people had done for their repeats, and I saw in Petite Knit's, hers was 8, but I have a feeling, I mean, because I don't know how tall she is, but I'm fairly short, I'm not even 5'2", so chances are that she's taller than me. But I was looking at other people's projects, especially people who had been knitting the smaller sizes that I had been knitting, and very rarely did I ever see anyone with 6 diamonds. I did see some with like 6.5 to 7, and so I decided to trust my gut from when I had tried it on that it was too short, and so then I knitted 6.5 diamonds, and I started the ribbing, and I did a few rows of ribbing, and I had done that real early in the morning. I had actually gotten up earlier than I usually do in order to get a little bit of knitting in before work, and then kind of like in the back of my mind throughout my day. I had it kind of been like tickling in the back of my mind about what to do about the length. And I got home at the end of the day after work and I tried it on again and I was like, you know what? This is still just not long enough. And so I'm so proud of myself. I actually frogged the ribbing that I'd done. It was only like 3 rows, but I don't know, I don't really tend to frog things, and I feel like I'm maturing as a knitter by being willing to frog things in order to get the garment that I want, so I'm proud of myself. So I frogged the ribbing and then I knitted to a full 7 repeats. So this has a full 7 of these diamond repeats here. And then I did the ribbing and I did the full amount of ribbing that is suggested. And then I bound off doing an Italian bind off. I did not do the setup rows, the double knitting setup rows before the bind off though, because those double knitting setup rows tend to cinch things in. And I have found, especially with acrylic yarn, that you don't really tend to block out the way that you do with wool. I often can't get with ribbing it to stretch into the point where it's supposed to be, and so that cinching that happens with ribbing before blocking, I often find it just like stays, and I can't with washing get rid of it that much. Like the stitches tend to relax a little bit with acrylic yarn after you wash them, but I have never steam blocked something, which is what you're supposed to do with acrylic if you're gonna like try to legit block it. Is the research that I have done into what other people, you know, the information that's out there on the internet seem to conclude that if you have acrylic garment that you need to try to change at all with blocking, that you steam block it. I don't have a steamer, so I haven't done that. So I was trying not to get it to cinch in too much, and so I did not do the setup rows in the ribbing, and I also actually did not go down a needle size. So I knit this whole thing on 5mm needles, including the ribbing. So those are a few modifications that I've made so far to the pattern. The next thing is these button plackets. So I have very successfully made double knit button bands before, and I really like how they look. And you know, I've had no problem using acrylic yarn to make them. I honestly don't think that they actually take that long in terms of like, I know people kind of hype up how long they take, but I found it to be like, honestly, kind of an enjoyable process. So, however, I don't think that this garment would look good with a double knit button band for my personal style, just me personally. So, because I think I've seen like 1 or 2 projects in Ravelry that did double knit button bands, and I really prefer the ribbed button band look for this project. So I wanted to do a ribbed button band. My cats are running wild. I wanted to do a ribbed button band where you pick up all the stitches and then you knit this way, like long ways. But I was, again, worried about that cinching in because I thought it would look so not what I wanted if it was like normal fabric here and then you get the button band and it would be like, you know, it would sit like this, so that's not what you want. So what I did is I ignored the pickup rate in the pattern, and I decided to pick up about every stitch, 1 stitch for every row. And honestly, I think I was actually even in some cases more stitches than every row. And you also were supposed to go down some needle sizes in order to knit the ribbing, and I did not go down a needle size. So I have knit everything on 5mm needles. And so this is the final product for the button placket that I have finished. I'll get it in the light here. I'm filming in the evening time today, so it might be slightly less light. But I think that it sits pretty good. I think that the kind of like the little bit of wobbliness here is partly because there's purl stitches here, and because maybe I could have been neater when I was like picking up stitches. I still have definitely not mastered that art. It's like the one downside I have to just drop shoulders in general is that I don't necessarily like all the picking up stitches, but I'm actually happy with how this is laying, and I think that yeah, I think it's gonna work out. So this is how it's gonna be. There's still the collar to do. You do the collar after you do both of the plackets, so that the collar is like sitting on top of the placket, so you can't do the collar before you do the plackets. So I think that the collar, like also adding the collar is gonna like give it some nice structure. And I have picked up, I just shoved the needle back here because it's poking me. And then I've picked up for the second placket, I'm like halfway through. I'm actually just about to do the row where you make the buttonholes. And so I have come to another crossroads now that I decide what the length I want. I've come to another crossroads, which is that I think I want to do toggle buttons for this, but I don't have them. And so I don't know how big to make the buttonhole, and I'm kind of thinking that I should make it smaller than what Petite says you should make, because she was using larger circular buttons. I think that's like what the buttonholes are designed for. And if I use toggle buttons, I think like I'm gonna put it in, you know, skinny side. When you put the button in the hole, it's gonna go skinny side in, and then the length of it will like hold it, will be larger than the hole and like hold it there. So I think I'm just going to, even though I don't have the buttons, I'm going to go for a smaller buttonhole, because knit fabric will tend more to stretch. And so if I end up having buttons that are bigger than the buttonhole I need, I can shove them through and they'll stay. But if I have a hole that's too big, then I can't use the button because it won't actually keep things in. So that's what I'm trying to decide now. Yeah, that's probably what I'm gonna do. If you have any thoughts, please let me know what you think. I actually saw on Instagram, I forget who posted it, but someone was talking about an afterthought buttonhole, which I didn't even know existed. So I might do like a quick, you know, YouTube search of what that even is. And if it seems like not very hard and still looks good, I might just knit the placket with no buttonholes at all and then do an afterthought buttonhole. But we'll see. So I am making a lot of progress with this. I cast this on October 1st, so I've been working on this for about 10 days, a little bit over a week, and I'm really happy with it. So I am kind of thinking this might end up being my Rhinebeck sweater. I am going to Rhinebeck in about a week. I've never been to a yarn festival before, and so I'm going, you know, I think Rhinebeck's the biggest one out there, so it's gonna be kind of a shock, but it's in New York, so it's drivable from here. And my friend who's also a knitter, we're going together, and so it's gonna be super fun. So we're gonna, you know, stay in New York and go to Rhinebeck. Obviously I'm not gonna be buying any wool yarn there because I don't knit with wool, but I do believe, just from things that I've heard, that there are other things to purchase. And also, like, the point in me going is not necessarily to like spend a lot of money and buy things. It is to kind of peruse what is there, but also it's just kind of to be, you know, to be more part of the knitting community. I do know that there's going to be some people who, not that I know personally, but that I have kind of been following from social media and YouTube and stuff, that are going to be there. So, if, you know, you might run into people that you know there. So yeah, that'll be really fun. I'm really excited to go to Rhinebeck. I'm going to make a little vlog for Rhinebeck, so we can share it all together. So I think that'll be really fun. But yeah, I am thinking that there's like a small chance that this could be my Rhinebeck sweater, but that's about a week away. If this is all I work on, I might be able to finish it, but I don't have the buttons. I could do something where I either just go to Rhinebeck with no buttons on it, or I could put the buttons that I do have on it just for Rhinebeck, and then order the buttons that I actually want and then change this out, because I feel like it's not that long to sew in buttons. What, maybe an hour or something. I'm pretty slower. That's where we're at for this. I am going to be picking up less stitches. I am going to be picking up less stitches on the sleeve because I do not want it to proof out. So I think I'm just going to pick up around the stitches maybe at like a 1x1 rate or something. I do not know what she says in the pattern. I haven't looked ahead, but just going to pick up stitches that I think looks normal, and then do some math to try to figure out, to make sure everything, all the texture lines up where it's supposed to line up, and go from there, which will help me with my yarn chicken that I'm playing. So I discussed a lot in my last podcast about how I had like just enough yarn for what is called for in this pattern. I have like 966 yards of Craft Special DK, and which I'm holding double, and the pattern calls for 957 for the size that I'm knitting. And I thought that I had 5 skeins of yarn, and it just really didn't seem like it was gonna happen, because I finished the first skein when I was like maybe here or something. Or the first skein, but the first 2 skeins held double. When I was like just into the bodies, so I'd finished the whole yoke and a little bit into the body with the first skein, and I was thinking, there's no way I can finish with like 1.5 skeins, 3 skeins held double, 1.5 skeins left. So I do think that I still actually only have 966 yards, but I actually have 6 skeins. So I was looking in my stash for some stock yarn for another project I'm gonna talk about, but it was like back hidden in the corner. There's this skein emerged, and it was Craft Special in parchment, and it was like sent from heaven. You know, the yarn chicken god sent it to me. And so it seems a lot more feasible to me that after this point, with like 2 skeins, that I could finish sleeves and placket and stuff, just based off of other sweaters that I've knit. I use like 2.5 to 300 gram skeins for in DK weight for a sweater for my size normally. And so if I'm holding things double, then I would need about 6. And so that's what I have. So I think it's only I still only have 966 yards because that number that I got was off of my Ravelry stash calculations, and I did put in the right amount into that. So I only have 906 yards, so it's still only just barely enough, but it just like in my mind, I was thinking like 5 skeins, like how could that even be possible? So I have another skein, it's gonna be okay. And my plan is that when I'm knitting the sleeves, because I'm not even done with the second batch of 2 yet. So that's definitely gonna finish, I think, the second placket, front placket here, and the collar, and probably start on the sleeve. And I think what I'm gonna do is knit both sleeves to right before where I would start my ribbing, and then move to the other one, so that in the very small off chance that I'm not gonna have enough yarn, I could do something where I knit each cuff just in a different color, probably a brown. I've got a bulky weight brown yarn, which I think if I hold it single, it'll be, actually I think it's still a little bit thicker than what this is, but I think it'll do. Or I was thinking just now, actually, I might have like really just like missing, you know, a few yards less than I need. And what if I did like just the little like trim at the edge of the cuff? That might be cute in a brown, because it's a very like fall color, so I'm gonna have brown buttons, just like the very trim. I don't know, I think that might be cute, honestly. I might not do that anyways, even if I do have enough yarn. But I actually think this is gonna be like the first time ever that I use most of the yarn that I bought for a project, because I'm like really bad about overbuying. But again, like yarn chicken is really annoying, so maybe overbuying's okay. There's gotta be a striped sweater in my future at some point so I can use up all these scraps that I have. But yeah, this project is going really well. The pattern is like memorizable super easily, because it's just like, oh, you're increasing the pearls and now you're decreasing the pearls, and so you can kind of just like go back and forth like that. And there's this one single knit stitch that you don't do in moss stitch when you're otherwise doing moss stitch. And at least for the way that I've been knitting this, who knows if it's really intended, I haven't even looked, but I've been doing the time when you wouldn't just be going back and forth where knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, in order to maintain the moss stitch with that only knit stitch column in the center. I have been doing the part where you would need to do like 3 knit stitches in a row in order to maintain that knit stitch the whole time on the right side so I can really see it, and then on the wrong side where it's kind of like gets all muddled in with all of the purl stitches, that one is just knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, and it just lines up where I'm doing for the wrong side would be like a purl obviously on the other side of that knit column. Where I'm doing a purl on that knit column on the wrong side, it just like lines up. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was totally intentional by Petite Knit, so to have it be that way, because I think she's just like really good at those small details to make the knitting experience so much better. And so that like helped memorize the design, because once I realized that I wasn't gonna have to really keep track of where that straight knit column was, then it went even faster. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. So this right here, this straight line, there's one here too. This on the other side, you can see there's like moss stitch here, moss stitch here. So when you're on the right side, you have to knit 3 knits in a row, but when you're on the wrong side, it's just knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. And so there's really like no danger of you accidentally doing making this a purl when it should be a knit. And so that was a good realization. So yeah, this is the Esther Jacket by Petite Knit. It's been on my needles for like 10 to 11 days, and I have finished the body, moved on to the button plackets, and we are moving along. Alright, so next up is another WIP called the Hollingbourne Socks that I am knitting, and I'm knitting this out of the 52 Weeks of Sock book. And I was partly inspired to cast this on because of Brooke Willow's cow that she is hosting called the Brooke Club Knit Along. And it is the idea behind the knit along is that you knit something from a physical book that you have. And so I have this 52 Weeks of Sock book that I haven't used yet. And one of the patterns in there is the Hollingbourne Socks. And the pattern in there is by Charlotte Stone. And if you haven't heard of this book, I would be surprised because it seems like everyone talks about it. But this is a collection of patterns by many different designers in the same book. So it's not one designer. So it was a bunch of designers published all together, and this is by Lane Publishing. And there's more than one edition. So I think this must be the first edition because there's no I don't know, it doesn't say 2 on it, but there's actually 2, I think. There's like a second one that came out after this one with even more patterns in it. So this is a Hollingbourne sock. So it's a colorwork sock pattern that I cast on for myself. I've knit 2 colorwork things. I've knit the porcelain sweater, and I've also knit I think it's called the merit mittens, and I absolutely loved the knitting process of both of those. Both the porcelain sweater and the merit mittens, loved it. The merit mittens I knit when last year I had like the worst flu I've ever had in my life, and it was like those mittens that like kept me going. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun following the charts. So I thought that I would like to do colorworks socks. So last week I had just basically done the cuff and I hadn't started any of the colorwork. I'm knitting this out of Rocco Comfort Sock, which is, I believe it's 50-50 nylon and acrylic, in a brown and gray. Let me zoom in. So you can see I've done a little bit of the color work there. It's starting to emerge, which is always like, that's a fun part of color work. It's like when you can see things starting to emerge. I've only worked on these one session, maybe like an hour and a half or something. And to be honest, I was finding it just like tedious for some reason. Maybe just the small needles. And so I am debating ripping them out, because I'm not that far and I just like don't feel any desire to work on them. And so I'm thinking that maybe I am going to cast on, I think probably in the brown, or maybe not even cast on, we'll see. I'm thinking that I'll either put these to a side or rip them out. I don't really need the needle. I like put them on these random needles because I only have one set of 9-inch circular sock needles, which is what I prefer to use, and I'm using them for my new cast on, which I'll talk about in a second. I took out that needle so that I could use it for the new cast on, and so I just put these on another random needles that I had, and I suppose there's no harm in me just like throwing these in my knitting stuff. Maybe I'll just like cut the yarn or something and throw them in my needle stuff. Because I just don't feel inspired to work them. I just really feel like it. There's nothing, like, it's a great pattern and it's written clearly. I think I just don't like colorwork socks as I thought that I would. I do have a feeling that this winter is going to be like a colorwork winter for me, and it's going to be like kicked off in November, even though that's fall, but like I'm going to make the holly sweater for Christmas, and I really want to make some sort of, those traditional sweaters where there's like colorwork circular yoke and then stocking it on the side. I loved making those merit mittens. I kind of want to make some more colorwork mittens. I don't know if I need more than one, but I definitely think that it would be fun to make some for like some family members or something. So it's gonna be a colorwork winter, and kind of in like anticipation for that, I cut the cast these on, but I would just so much rather work on my other projects. I don't really see a reason like why. I'm not gonna like force myself to work on these if I don't want to. So I think that these might end up getting frogged. I don't know. What do you guys think? Should I just like set these aside or just frog it and move on? I think if I did that, I would probably sift through that 52 weeks of sock book and cast on like either a cable or a lace pattern. Something, I think that I need something like slightly simple, but still not, I just don't want to do vanilla socks, something like slightly more fancy, because I do wear my Petal Drop socks a lot. I wear them once a week, and then they're one of the first socks I pull out of, like, once they've been washed, I wear them again immediately. So I really, really love them. I get a lot of wear out of them. So I think I would benefit from like more knit socks. So I think I should knit more. So I think that I'm just like learning what, learning what kind of things I like, because I'm really enjoying my new cast on, which is a lace sock. And you'll be able to see by how much work I've done on it. So that's the very quick update on the Hollingbourne socks by Charlotte Stone. I'm not really feeling them. Might frog them. It's absolutely, there's nothing wrong with the pattern. I do recommend them. And I recommend this book in general, but yeah, that's all. I don't want to be a downer, but not feeling them. Not really feeling them, and that's really all I have to say. So my next WIP is a new cast on, and it's my very first Christmas gift cast on of the season, and it is the Petal Drop Socks by Florence Miller. And And I talked about this a little bit in my last podcast, and I was planning on this since this is a Christmas gift cast on for my mom, and she requested these socks specifically because she had seen that I had made them and she really liked how they looked, and she wanted a pair of socks to match her Arctic Light sweater that I knit her out of a cream color. And so she wanted some kind of like fancy-ish, or just like, by fancy I mean like some sort of texture like lace or cabled something socks, and she liked how the Petal Drop Socks worked, and I had knit the pattern before, and so I knew that I liked it, and I knit it really quickly. And so I am making her these, and so I actually just recently finished, make sure it focuses, I actually just recently finished the whole first leg, and I've started on the heel flap. So I'm just starting those slip stitches for the heel flap, and I'm knitting the second size in this. So I knit the first size for myself, I'm knitting the second size for her, and I'm knitting this out of Cascade Yarns Cherub Sock in the color, I believe it's 09, which is ecru. So they have a white and an ecru, which this seems very white to me still, but I guess their white is even whiter. And I think that this is a really good white yarn. It's not that shiny. I was talking in last podcast about how sometimes acrylic yarns can be kind of shiny in cream or white, and I really don't like that. I don't find them to be that shiny in other colors generally, but I really wanted to find a fingering weight white or cream yarn to use for my holly sweater, and so I thought that this cherub sock might be a good fingering yarn to use, and so I partly chose this yarn for her socks in order to give it a little test run for my holly sweater, and I think that it passed. So I think that I'm gonna use this yarn from the main color for my holly sweater, and then hold it with a white mohair, an acrylic mohair that I've discovered, which I feel like I've been raving about for the past 3 podcasts, but it's just so great. Lamy Yarn Soft Sensations. If you want a cheaper mohair, or if you are allergic to wool, or if you don't use animal fibers, but you still want to get that same mohair look that people can get with animal fibers, Lamy Yarn Soft Sensations, you should check it out. But I was, as I was saying, yeah, I wanted to find a white, and I think that this is going to be it. So the other reason why I chose this yarn is because I didn't want to use the same yarn that I had used in my socks. So I knit mine also in a cream color in Cascade Yarns Cotton Socks, spelled with an X, which is, I think it's like 80 or 90% cotton, and then the other percentage is nylon. And I find that it's just not stretchy enough or soft enough. It just needs more nylon, I think. I also have just been like literally throwing them in the wash, like washing and drying, and not treating them any differently. So that might be something where I should be like washing them with more care. But the hank of cotton socks was so soft. It's part of why I picked it out in the store. I got it from Webb's, America's Yarn Store, which is in Massachusetts. Another amazing place. If you're anywhere near, go to Webb's. But yeah, so I got it at the Webb's Yarn Store, and I bought both like a bright white, hi honey. I got both a bright white and a kind of like cream, and so I knit my socks out of a cream. And so I have some left over from that skein, so I could like technically knit another pair of socks, but the knitting experience was fine with them, but wearing them, they are not as soft to work up, even before like any sort of washing. It was not as soft worked up as it was in the hank, and yeah, the like washing drying hasn't gone very well. So I wanted to use something different with like way more nylon and was softer, so I wanted some acrylic. And so this is about, again, this is very similar to like, this is kind of, I think, like Cascade's Yarn's version of Barocco Comfort. So this is like 50, like basically 50-50 or maybe 60-40 acrylic and nylon. So it's gonna be really sturdy. It's really soft. It's got a nice kind of like little bit of like a halo in terms of like fuzziness coming off of it. And yeah, I think it's soft enough. It's good yarn. So the knitting process in terms of the pattern has gone really well. This is a great pattern by Florence Miller, the Petal Drop Socks. I believe it's the one that's a free pattern by her that she has a step-by-step tutorial for. So if you've never knit socks before, you can go knit these socks for free. I think it might be like it's a pay what you want sort of pattern. And so if you are in a position where you can pay for their pattern, she has an option where you can do that. You think you can have 50% or you can have it free. And so you can kind of like choose what to give to support her. But she has a tutorial for them. So I think when I first knit them, I watched just like the tutorial on how to do the lace motif, and then I was off to the races. But yeah, I think it'd be a really good pattern if you have never knit socks before. So in terms of going through this pattern, it has been totally smooth sailing. And I've knit, this is the second time I've knit them, and so I was able to knit the whole first leg in a week. But I have been battling with this yarn. So this does not come, obviously, it's like in a cake here, but this does not come in a hank. It comes in a skein. I believe that's the right terminology, where it's all kind of like already wove together. So obviously a hank would be really easy to wind into a cake because it's all like set up so that you just like unwind the hank, you put it on your Swift, and then you wind it up. But these were in skeins, and so like theoretically I could just start knitting from them and not have to do anything because they're in skeins. And so that's what I do with most other yarns that I have. A lot of the yarn that I have comes in skeins and not hanks. I have some that do come in hanks, but not all of it. So at first I was knitting from a, what would you call it? A center pull, instead of just like right from the top, but a center pull from the skein. And I was doing this because I have actually wound up a cake of this yarn in a different color before. It was like a gray color of Cascade Yarns cherub sock, and I had a big issue winding up that cake because pretty quickly after I started winding up the cake from the skein started to like kind of like come apart, and it was just like really loose, and so like all of the strings were like crossing each other and like wanting to get tangled. And then once I got to like where the center was, there was like these big like chunks of stuff all tangled together, and so it took me like, I don't even, like an hour and a half or longer or something to wind up that previous skein. So when I got this yarn, I was like, okay, I'll just do a center pull instead of from the outside, and then maybe I will be able to not have an issue with the skein kind of like fluffing up and not disintegrating, but getting a huge tangle. I thought wrong though. So fairly quickly I ran into a situation where at very first, when I pulled out from the center, there was an initial little blob of tangleness. It didn't take me that long to untangle, so I was like, okay, maybe that's just the first one and it'll be fine. And then it was like, once a motif repeat or so, I would run into another blob of tangling and have to untangle it. And so I think that maybe that skein's like not designed to be a center pull, and I was just like forcing it. I think there are some skeins where they are only designed to be pulled from the outside and not from the center, and so I discovered that I'm pretty sure cherub socks, one of them, where you're not supposed to pull from the center. And so I got so fed up that I actually partway through, where's my sock? Partway through knitting this, I guess, let's see, where is it? Kind of recently, yeah, maybe like here-ish. Maybe like when I got to like about here. That day I had twice, I think, had to untangle some yarn spaghetti, and I was so over it that I cut the yarn and wound up the cake from pulling from the outside. I had to totally baby it, the skein, as it was like rolling around to go through the ball winder, come into a hank, and like flip it when it wanted to flip. And there was a few times when I had to like move strands over each other so that it wouldn't tangle. And then when I got to the very end, there was like a few more, once I get like again closer to that center, there was a few more small blobs that I had to untangle, but honestly actually not as bad as I was expecting given that very first winding that I had done with the gray yarn. So yeah, I actually am gonna have to like weave in some ends on my sock, which generally like you can knit up 2 pairs of socks out of 1 skein of yarn generally, and so you don't have to weave, like the only ends you have to weave in is like your cast on, and then when you do your Kitchener at the end. But I am gonna have to weave in 1 pair of extra ends because I just like couldn't handle it anymore. But I was thinking, because it's on the leg, I have less of a risk of it being uncomfortable, because you really don't want to, I think, my understanding is you really don't want to weave in ends, like especially on the bottom of the foot, where you're gonna be like stepping on it. Like you don't want like for a random like double layer of fabric that's not everywhere else, because it would feel like there's like it would feel like there's like something in your shoe kind of situation. Or if the sock is like really, really tight, probably like anywhere on the foot, you wouldn't want that. But this is gonna be my extra woven in end. It's gonna be on the leg, so I think I'll be okay. And these are like, this yarn is like really stretchy, and because this pattern has like pearl stitches in between the lace, it's kind of like almost like it's giving like a ribbed effect where you get that like cinched in stretch. So I think it's totally gonna be fine. but it has drastically improved the knitting experience for me just to like pull off the cake. So now whenever I knit with this yarn, because I do really like it. Yeah, see what I mean? It's just kind of, it just really wants to move around. But whenever I knit with this yarn again, because I do really like it, I'm going to just wind it up in a cake initially from the skein, deal with any sort of little like tangling that's gonna happen, and then be pretty good. I am curious what's gonna happen when I get to the very end of the skein. I think I'm gonna get a pair of socks out of the skein and have more left over. Maybe I'll knit another pair for myself or something. Not a Petal Drop Socks, but like another. Yeah, that's my story for the Petal Drop Socks. I'm knitting these for my mom for Christmas. I wanted to finish them in October because it's Socktober, and so I'm just gonna finish them and put them away. I bet I will have a finished sock by the next week. I'm not quite sure when I'm gonna film my another podcast because of Rhinebeck, so it's probably gonna be more like 2 weeks since I film my next podcast, so there's a small chance that I actually might have both songs done by my next podcast, which would be kind of fun. So that is my final WIP. So just to wrap things up here, I do have like a few other plans rummaging around. One thing I'm thinking of, again, being inspired by Socktober, and my socks are just on the mind right now. I am very intrigued by the idea of a DK weight sock and knitting a sock pretty quickly, and for one just being kind of like on the chunkier side and really cozy. And I am toying with the idea of making the Sunday socks by Petite Knit for my brother for Christmas. And I think what I would do instead of actually using a DK is holding this brown Barocco Comfort sock double, because I think, you know, brown would be a fine sock color for him that he'd wear, and I think like rib socks, you know, I don't know, this is kind of classic and in that chunky style. Yeah, I've heard good things about that pattern, so I can imagine it being just like really, just like such a dopamine knit where you just like knit it, you could like knit a sock in a day kind of thing. Or maybe I might do something where it's like one weekend I decide, okay, this is gonna be like a Sunday sock weekend, and I just like knit those socks that weekend. And then it would like, obviously like the earlier I can do Christmas gifts, the better. So I'm thinking about doing that. And then the other plan, which I talked about on my last podcast, but there's been some kind of developments, is, so I'm making a sweater for my stepdad for Christmas because he requested one. And so I'm making a Henley, and I have decided on the Georgetown Henley by Alice Griffin, I'm pretty sure. It's a Knit Picks pattern. If it's not Alice Griffin, I'll put it on the screen who it actually is, but that pattern is designed for some wool yarn from Knit Picks, and they actually have like a kit on their website so you can order that yarn. However, they don't give you an option to order non-wool yarn with that kit, which is like slightly annoying, but whatever. So I need to find some yarn for this project, and my stepdad really liked the picture, you know, the sweater in the picture for the pattern, and so he wants the gray trim and this kind of like blue heathered look, which comes from this like not color work, but like texture with multiple colors situation. And so one of the colors would be gray. That'll be easy to find. I have like some ideas. I might just get Hobby. I believe this is a worsted weight pattern if I'm remembering correctly. So I might do Hobby XL or maybe Brava from Knit Picks, since it is, I don't know, seems fitting to use Knit Picks yarn. I might use Brava worsted from Knit Picks, but my issue is the blue. So I would like to find a heathered blue just to add a little bit more, even more like color dimension to the sweater. But the blue acrylic yarn that I've been able to find is either like turquoise or like navy, or if it is heathered, it's like blue and purple, which is not gonna work. And so I really need a blue and gray, ideally like heathered, or like blue and like different shades of blue and gray heathered yarn for him. Yeah, I really like, I need like suggestions maybe, but I've done like a little bit of what I did like one time of searching, so I guess like I can put some more effort in and try to find it more. But I did one time of searching where I was going on like all my usual places where I order yarn from and looking at all their blues in the weight that would make sense, and yeah, I haven't found anything that's suitable, and I really would like to cast this on soon, so I'm really hoping to order yarn for this next week. And so I think I might need to like sit down this weekend and like really search hard for some yarn for him. Maybe honestly I should just go to a craft store and look at the yarn that they have there. and be able to actually look at it. Usually the acrylic that I find in craft stores is not as good as the acrylic that I find from like yarn suppliers online, but you know, acrylic is acrylic, whatever. Yeah, so yeah, maybe I'll go to a craft store in my town and see what I can find. But yeah, that's my dilemma with the Georgetown Henley that I'm making for my stepdad. It'll be okay. I'll find some yarn. I might have to make some concessions or something. But yeah, I think that'll be ordering next week, so there might be some acquisitions in the next episode. But yeah, I think that brings us to the end. Like I said, I am going to Rhinebeck, so that vlog will be coming, and also I'm just like really excited at the prospect of being able to like meet some other knitters. You know, I've said on this podcast before that my main motivation to make this podcast was just to be a part of the knitting community more. In addition to adding something to the knitting podcast space where someone was actually using acrylic, because I don't see very many podcasters using acrylic, but my main reason was to find knitting community and build knitting community. And I think participating in things like going to the yarn festival is a way to do that. And also I just finished up my very first test knit. That's like another way to participate in the knitting community. And so yeah, it's been a fun few months increasing my involvement in the knitting community after kind of just like being obsessed with knitting for the past about like 2 years. 2 years ago is when I first started knitting. So yeah, I am very excited for my 2024, what I knit in 2024 at the end of this year, just because it has been quite the year. Like in 2023 was my first year of knitting, and so a lot of that was really just like learning, and I had knit sweaters for my family, and so 2024 this year is really the first year where I was like dedicatedly knitting mainly for myself. And as soon as a garment went off the needles, a new garment went on, that sort of knitting. My first year wasn't quite like that. It was slower and wasn't as continuous, and I was just picking away at learning new things. But this year has been like one garment after the other. I've just been like really loving it. So I can't wait to just like recap that with you all, and just like relive the experience of each garment. So that's gonna be fun. But yeah, I guess how did I get on this? I'm going to Rhinebeck. I think that's how I got on this, but yeah, I'm going to Rhinebeck. It's gonna be fun. And yeah, I think that brings us to the end finally. What I thought was gonna be a quick update turned into a bit of a long one, but I don't know about you, but I love long knitting podcasts. So yeah, with that, I'll send lots of big hugs to everyone, and I'll see you next time.